Because understanding great literature is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. On the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, we commit to reading, dissecting, and analyzing the great books of the Western canon. You know, those books, from Jane Austen to Shakespeare, and everything else in between, that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school. We do this for our listeners, the owner, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the civic leader who doesn't have the time to read, dissect, analyze, and leverage insights from literature to execute leadership best practices in the confusing and chaotic postmodern world we all now inhabit. Welcome to the rescuing of Western civilization at the intersection of literature and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 124. With our book today, well, actually, we're not going to have a book today. It's going to be one of those sort of jog off into the hinterlands, or maybe just we're going to take a left turn. And it kind of goes along with our general theme this month of science fiction authors and the leadership lessons you can learn from science fiction authors. Today, instead of talking about the book we were going to talk about, which was by Philip K. Dick, a collection of short stories by him. The book that I have here, I'm going to show it here on the video, and you can check that out if you want to see that on the YouTube, is a Counterfeit Unrealities. It's a collection of about 4 Philip K. Dick short stories, including, actually the 4 that are in here are The 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, let's see, Ubik, and A Scanner Darkly. Those are the 4 that are in this collection. These stories were incredibly difficult for me to find because, weirdly enough, you can't find Philip K. Dick stories in the library as easily as you can find Heinlein or Asimov or Ray Bradbury. And we already covered Fahrenheit 451 in a previous episode. And of course, we've already covered Dune by Frank Herbert. And so today we were going to cover Philip K. Dick's short stories. And I'll tell the story of how I eventually ran across his short stories here in just a moment. But it was a little bit too late for the show. So instead, we're going to talk with our special guest today, our regular guest host, Tom Libby. I shouldn't say special because now he's regular, so he's not special anymore. He's just Tom. He's Tom. We're going to talk with Tom today about what are the leadership lessons we can learn from our top 5. We're going to sort of pull a movie kind of idea here. What are our top 5 science fiction films? So I'd like to welcome Tom Libby back to the show. How you doing, Tom?
As I've recently started saying to people, I'm living my best life. I used to, when people said how I was doing, I used to say I'm living the dream, and then wait for them to say something positive, and then say, let me just remind you that nightmares are dreams too. But that I've been using it for so long that it just got old. So now I got to figure out something else to say when somebody says how you doing. So that's my new one.
People stopped living their best life about 10 years ago. They stopped saying that. So you're about on trend.
Yeah. I'm right there on track with my life expectancy.
It's okay. It's fine. Well, we are, like I said, we were going to cover the short stories of the writer Philip K. Dick, who was out of all the science fiction writers of the mid-20th century, Philip K. Dick, along with Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, and Ray Bradbury, sort of sit on the Mount Rushmore of science fiction, mid-20th century science fiction writers. Philip K. Dick's stories have been turned into films. A Scanner Darkly was a film back in the 1990s with, I believe, Keanu Reeves was in A Scanner Darkly. Let's see what else. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was turned into the movie, or was adapted into the film Blade Runner, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. The Man in the High Castle was turned into an Amazon show. If you have never watched that, that one is really, really intense and really, really interesting. My wife didn't even make it through like the first season of that show. It's about, well, the story is about an alternative historical future where the Nazis win World War II. It is just about as horrible as you think it would possibly be. Philip K. Dick was born in 1928. He died in 1982, and he was wildly imaginative. He graduated. No, he didn't graduate. He went to, and I love this because I kind of got this at the beginning of the book, or the collection that I picked up. He he went to the University of Sacramento, I think it was, or University of California. Here it is. Yes, he was born in Chicago in 1928 and lived most of his life in California. He briefly attended the University of California, but he dropped out before completing any classes. In 1952, he began writing professionally and proceeded to write 36 novels and 5 short story collections. He won the Hugo Award for the Best Novel in 1962 for The Man in the High Castle, and the John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Best Novel of the Year in 1974 for, and I love the titles, by the way, of his books, Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said. Philip K. Dick died of heart failure following a stroke on March 2nd, 1982 in Santa Ana, California. Just like Ray Bradbury, who didn't go to college either, he just went to the library. Philip K. Dick just started writing, and he never stopped. So this book that I got, this collection of his short stories, Counterfeit Unrealities, which has Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, I picked up actually not yesterday, but a couple days ago at a antique book sale, where I was on an anniversary trip with my wife. We were celebrating our wedding anniversary. I'm walking around, and all of a sudden I see Philip K. Dick, and I go, "What's in there?" And so I pull it. I open up the book, and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is in there. And I said to my wife, "I've been looking for this book in the library, and I can't find it in my local library." And I didn't want to order it off of Amazon. And guess what? For this hardcover edition of Counterfeit Unrealities, with the 4 short stories in it, by Philip K. Dick, all of which, by the way, come in novella form. Okay, so they're fairly long, they're fairly substantial, but they are still not exactly novel length. But they're a little bit longer than a short story. I paid 35 cents.
That's better. That's better than my story. I got a first edition hard copy of Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee for $1.
I think Philip K. Dick would love that. Actually, I think he was a very cranky guy. He would actually probably have not like he'd have been like, "Yeah, that's about right. That seems about right. That seems accurate for all my effort." Yeah. And so I have started reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep because I went right to that one. But I'm only like 2 chapters in. So yeah, we're not going to cover that today. Instead, like I said, we're going to talk about the top 5 sci-fi films and what we can learn from them. I have my top 5 list. I challenged Tom a few hours ago before we pressed record on this podcast to come up with his top 5 list. And he said he struggled. So do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
Let me just explain why I struggled. Because here's the thing. When you're thinking of movie genres, right? You think of, you have comedy. Mm-hmm. You're expecting it to be funny. You have drama. You're expecting it to be either serious or sad or whatever. You have very few like variations of what drama is. If you look at, sci-fi is one of the very, very, very few that can be, you can call it sci-fi, but still be funny or dramatic or horror even. Like sci-fi runs the gamut of what these films are designed to be. So when you're thinking of like the top 5, like I said to Hassan before we came on, I was like, it depends on the mood I'm in that day.
Okay. You see this with a lot of science fiction films. Like, let's talk about science fiction, because one of the things we've been talking about this month is the genre in the shorts episodes, the genre of science fiction, right? And it is one of those genres that, for a long time, because of Jules Verne, like Jules Verne is the original and H.G. Wells. Those two guys, they set up sort of what sci-fi was going to be. You could make an argument that Edgar Allan Poe
Sure.
maybe, took
Yeah.
some shots at that, but he wasn't able to. You don't get a full understanding of science fiction without industrialization. And Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were writers who were right on the edge of industrialization, not on the edge, but they were right in the middle of industrialization. Like the world was turning over from agriculture to industrialization. And so you get the idea that you can go to the moon from, I think it was from Jules Verne. Or no, that was H.G. Wells. And then like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that's Jules Verne. You get these kind of ideas where like now these gee whiz technologies are showing up and we can do all this fantastical stuff, right? Okay. But for so long, that entire genre was mired in just being kid stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for the early part of the 20th century, like nobody took science fiction seriously, arguably until Ray Bradbury. Like Ray Bradbury elevated science fiction, and Isaac Asimov actually elevated science fiction to this level of like high literature where like moms could read it in Reader's Digest and not feel like they were, reading comic books. And that's the other thing. Like sci-fi and comic books also, like, which I'm going to talk about this for a little bit, but they all sort of crossed over, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like you think of Mary Shelley, right? Like, so we think of Frankenstein as a horror movie,
right,
or a horror genre, but it's essentially sci-fi. If you think about like
it
how
is
the whole monster comes together. It's like, it's to your point, the industrialization of the inner spirit, so to speak, that the horror was trying to invoke in the monster. And but I don't know. Again, it's one of the few genres that cover a lot. It runs a very wide berth of what your expectation of the movie is. The emotion that the movie invokes is very wide spectrum versus every other genre. You know what you're getting into. It's a comedy. It's supposed to make you funny. If it's a documentary, it's supposed to be educational. Like there's just like you have very clear expectations of most other genres. Sci-fi, you don't like.
Right, you have no idea what you're getting into.
No idea what you're getting into. And the reference I made earlier, it was like you got something like Spaceballs and Starship Troopers and Galaxy Quest, and then you got Terminator and Aliens and Prometheus. Like
I did struggle to not put Starship Troopers on my list of top 5. I do love that movie because it's based off of a Heinlein book.
Yeah,
it is so bitterly cynical. Like the movie toned down so many things. Like the Paul Verhoeven directed film toned down so many things in this story, but it's so bitterly cynical about just like everything. Like but Heinlein was known for that. He was known for just sort of having a problem, let's say. Let me be kind.
With authority. Yeah.
Well, yes, with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he even had a problem with, not a problem. He had challenges with how other science fiction writers were writing science fiction. Like how Edgar Allan Poe would write letters. Remember when we were reading Fall of the House of Usher, and I was reading some of the background on Poe, and he would like write, he would rip on like Melville or whoever. Like this guy sucks. Heinlein was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So top 5 films. All right. So my personal top 5, and I struggled with this because I do like, just like you, people like films. We both like so many films. So many things can go into, to your point, can go into that science fiction box. But if I'm gonna suss out 5 films, my number 5 film is going to be The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951.
I like that one.
And the reason I picked that number 5 and not something else is because not like Godzilla or something is because it goes along with all of that whole like post 1950s paranoia or post World War II paranoia, not only about the communists and the Red Scare and all that stuff is obvious in the film, but it also has the underpinnings of all the paranoia about nuclear weapons. Like we didn't really know what we had unleashed in the West, and we sort of just went, okay, we'll sort of see how this works. Kind of like
figure it out.
kind of like we're doing with AI right now. We'll just what the hell, just let it out of the box, it'll be fine. We'll be fine.
We'll
We'll
see where it
figure it out.
goes.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. We're going to beta test this.
What's the worst thing that can happen? We let
Right.
our 5-year-olds, today's 5-year-olds, will figure it out 20 years from now.
Yeah,
Whatever.
yeah, yeah, it'll be fine. They'll be blaming us, but we'll be dead, so it won't matter.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and the other thing the Day the Earth Stood Still really does, I think, well as a film, is that it crosses over genre-wise from radio, which War of the Worlds, by the way, please, crosses over from radio to like movies, and it's one of those films that it. And this is interesting. Back in the 1950s and the 1940s, 1950s, you had the height of the golden age of radio, basically radio shows that were just like movie productions. Like people forget that, like how much effort went into radio shows. Like we think that like true crime podcasts, like a lot of effort goes into that. No. Like they had sound guys, they had audiences, they had special effects, they had the whole thing. They were audio film.
Entire orchestras.
Right. Like I love old time radio shows. And The Day the Earth Stood Still is one of those movies that sort of chunks over into that other spot. So that was my number 5.
That's a good choice. I actually like that choice. I think that's actually a really good one. I have a hard time if you see so go back to my original problem with this whole thing is because if you're thinking of I think sci-fi in the 50s and 60s was just night and day different, right? Like it was just the way that the film directors and I mean, for crying out loud, Godzilla was a man in a suit stomping on models. Like, and then you watch Godzilla versus Kong today or something like that. And you're talking about Middle Earth. They're creating entire universes underneath, in between the mantle of the Earth and the crust. Like it's.
I watched that the other day with my wife. I was laying in bed in a hotel and I was watching it. And my wife walks in and walks past. She goes, "What the hell are you watching? What is this nonsense? Why are you watching Godzilla? This is ridiculous." And then she sat down and watched it for 45 minutes with me. And I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it's not ridiculous. Godzilla is fantastic.
And
Godzilla versus King Kong. And the fact that Godzilla wins that battle, I mean, I don't. Are we going to talk about the movies at all? Because
we can talk about the movies. Yeah, go ahead.
There is no way Godzilla wins that. I know Godzilla is supposed to be a little bit bigger and physical. The mental capacity of the gorilla is supposed to be more powerful than the physical capacity of the lizard. I don't understand how Godzilla wins that fight.
The lizard's mouth opens and blue light comes out.
Yeah.
The blue light is the equalizer. I don't know what's in that blue light. I had no idea. By the time I showed up in the movie, like that had already started. King Kong was like flopping around in the middle of the earth. I'm like, what the hell? He's in the center of the earth and there's mountains coming. What is happening here? It was very psychedelic. It was very trippy. No, but I think I don't know. It's reptiles. Okay, look, we live in a post-Jurassic Park world now.
Yes.
The monkeys eat the primates, or not the monkeys. Sorry, the lizards eat the primates. That's what they do.
Well, in Jurassic Park, the lizards are 100 times the size of the primates, so I get it. But King Kong, anyway.
The Tyrannosaurus. Okay, look, if you blew up Chris Pratt in Jurassic World to the size of the Tyrannosaurus Rex,
he would win that fight.
I don't think so. I think the Tyrannosaurus Rex would eat him. I'm taking the T-Rex all day and twice on that. He's got sharp teeth. Like when he bites, his bite pressure alone is just, forget it. The primate's done. The primate's soft and squishy. I think he's there. Maybe he's muscular, maybe or whatever. But
maybe that's no maybe. Think about it this way: a gorilla in real life. Now, a gorilla supposedly is approximately 10 times stronger than the average human man.
Oh yeah.
So now you take a 300-foot gorilla. I don't know.
Okay. I'm thinking, have you ever seen 2 jiu-jitsu white belts fight over anything?
Yes.
That was what it was.
Okay. So brute strength beats intelligence when you don't have enough intelligence to. I get it. All right, fine. We can move on.
I'm just saying. The reptile has a blue light that comes out of his mouth, and he's got sharp teeth. That's an equalizer. That's all I'm saying.
the second one was better. I thought I actually liked the one. Did you see the most recent one where the Godzilla and King Kong team up to beat this like other species of gorilla that I guess
Mm-mm.
Kong. Oh, you got to see the newest one. You got to
Well, I
see
gotta see
this.
this. Wait. There's more monkeys. Where do they come from?
There's a lot more. There's a lot more monkeys. They actually look more chimpanzee like than gorilla. Like Godzilla looks clearly gorilla. They look more
Oh,
chimpanzee like in the film. So
oh, dude,
uh,
wait till I get to my number two movie. We're gonna talk about apes. Yes, we are.
oh, you're not going to talk about Planet of the Apes, right? The please tell me you're talking about the original and not the new Rise of the Apes garbage. All right, what's number four? Let's
What's your
hold
number
on.
five? What's your fifth? What's your fifth? What's your top five films? What would be number five?
I think for me, I bounce around a lot. Like I will, as much as I was joking about it, I actually do really, really love the old school Godzilla movies. I like
Okay.
the older ones that the dubbed English and
Yeah.
like, and
With the Japanese people
like
screaming.
yeah, and like and when you watch it as a kid, it's like every other film is Godzilla being a good guy and then a bad guy, and then a good guy and
Mhm.
then a bad guy. Like he's here to save the human race in one film, and he's here to destroy and just live his best life in another film. Like it's and then like so, and then you have all these like it was like the original. I look at it as like the original version of Pokemon, right? Like so. Godzilla, I choose you. You're gonna go, fight King Ghidorah, like King Ghidorah, and Mothra was Godzilla's love interest, which don't even get me started. That was very
I
weird. But
can't even.
but
I don't even know
so
what's happening there.
so if I take that collection of films, that would probably be my number five. I don't think I could pick
Okay.
just one, but the Godzilla of the 50s and 60s,
Hmm.
I just think it was amazing. And as a child, now when I watch it today, I'm like, this is kind of a joke. Like this is really
Yeah,
kind
this
of
is some nonsense.
stupid. But as a kid, not knowing that was a man in a suit stomping on models,
Right.
it fascinated me. I don't even know I don't even know how else to say it. It was just like I'm envisioning like, oh my god, I'm never killing another lizard ever in my life because that could be Godzilla next time
So wait. You were probably a really big fan of like the Ray Harryhausen, like little models, like the way he did the stop motion models in the Ray Harryhausen
Yes,
movies, like back in the
yes,
day.
yes, yes,
Okay. Yeah, like Jason and the Argonauts, which is
yes.
not necessarily sci-fi, but
Right.
the technology that he used to put all that together, that guy was brilliant, by the way. He knew Ray Bradbury, by the way. They were good friends. Um, they met each other when like Ray Bradbury was a kid or something like that. Anyway, um, but you were probably a big fan of that stop motion photography kind of.
Yes.
Okay, all right, all right.
I liked
I
it.
don't know what
I
leadership
liked it.
lessons you can get from King Kong though, other than like get the hell out of the way of the monkey.
Well, I mean, okay, so
Something's bigger than you.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, the original, if you look at the original King Kong, I mean, that was, was that Faye Dunaway or something like that that was up there in the building with him and
Fay
like
Ray, Fay
Fay
Ray,
Ray. Thank you.
not
Like
Faye
so,
Dunaway. Faye
I don't
Dunaway was different. That's like it's network. She would have never stooped to be
so
next to
low,
a monkey. It wouldn't happen. She
but
had her
like,
standards.
yeah, I mean, the original, like even the original King Kongs, if you like, it took a long time for King Kong and Godzilla to be in the same movie. Like if you
Right.
remember, like
Yeah.
Godzilla was around for a lot longer, and
Hmm.
they and King Kong was like in essence, it was an Americanized version of Godzilla, right? Because
Right.
America looked at what the success over in Japan was with this Godzilla thing. And by the way, a lot of the storylines and essence of Godzilla came from like be ready, prepare yourself for this, people. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like
Yeah.
the idea that radiation was distorting animals and making animals look a little, that's what like people kind of came up with this idea. Now the folklore behind a Godzilla like thing is much older than that. I agree with that, so don't beat me up on the comments here if there's comments on the show about Godzilla being much older than 1942 or 44 rather. But the idea of Godzilla shooting fire, radiation breath and all that stuff. That did come after World War II. But
Well, and
so America saw all this and we're like, oh, we can do this. What's a more noble animal that we can use instead of like a chameleon or a or an iguana or whatever they thought Godzilla was. I don't even know. I don't even know what he was supposed to have morphed from, but America was like, oh well, gorillas are probably one of the more intelligent animals on the planet. Let's use that, and let's blow up a gorilla and see what happens. See what we can do with that. And then some brilliant person said, let's put them in the same movie.
well, King Kong. So the first King Kong came out in like I think the 30s, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
The 20s or 30s, and it was a one-off whatever. It was a one-off sort of phenomenon, right?
Right.
And then you're right. You get World War II, a whole bunch of other things happen, and some genius goes, "Hey, we should put these together. We should put." And by the way, that person should have been like, I don't know, given control of like a studio or something. Like that person was brilliant. To your point about Godzilla, not so much King Kong, but Godzilla representing the anxieties of nuclear destruction, particularly nuclear destruction as it happened to the Japanese, right? I agree with that. I think that we've got, well, the height of like managerial scientism, being able to like build something at mass that's destructive. The height of that was the atomic bomb. Like that was the height of that. The height of being able to build something that was positive was probably the Apollo moon mission, right? Or the moon missions. And then after that, it's just been long decline, which is why, by the way, most of those movies in the early part of the 21st century have become so stylized, and yet the plots are mostly just like there's no tension underneath the plot. You're just there for the monkey and the lizard fighting. Like that's literally all you're there for.
Same thing with Transformers.
Yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Well, Michael Bay would like to enter the chat.
Michael Bay can enter the chat all he wants. I'd fight him on it. Optimus Prime is nothing but a more intelligent Godzilla. I'm kidding.
He's a mecha. You get it right, Tom.
Mecha
anyway,
that's right.
All right. Okay. Well, my number 4 film is a little bit more of an intellectual science fiction film. And it is one from the director Stanley Kubrick, who is a director I have long time struggled with him, and I'll get into why in a minute here. But Dr. Strangelove, how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb. Peter Sellers is in this movie. He plays 5 different roles, including the role of Dr. Strangelove, the ex-Nazi who's in the wheelchair, who keeps doing the Sig Heil and like with his arm down. George C. Scott was in the movie as a crazy, what do you call it? American general, in the war room. The Russians are going to launch the nukes. Oh, by the way, Peter Sellers also plays the president of the United States. Sometimes in the same scenes. So it's kind of ridiculous. I can't remember who the guy is who plays the general. I can't remember his name. I'll look it up here in a minute. But you got the general who goes on and on about fluoride and like the water. And then he's got the British general working with him, also played by Peter Sellers, trying to stop the bomb from being dropped. And it's so absurd as a science fiction movie. Oh, by the way, the great James Earl Jones is in, recently deceased James Earl Jones is in Doctor Strangelove as the he's the not C-130, the B-17 pilot who's piloting the plane that drops the bombs on Russia to start the nuclear war, or to begin the World War III nuclear destruction. It's satire, to Tom's point. It's science fiction that operates as satire. It operates as a screed against the military industrial complex. It was released in 1964, which was the year after Kennedy got shot. And so people are still traumatized by the death of hope, and you can feel like the entire zeitgeist like sort of shifting over. Civil rights, which before was really just sort of a 10-year long sort of slow brewing thing, is about to really kick off. Tensions with the Russians are up because, Nikita Khrushchev had just a couple of years before, pulled off his shoe at the UN and banged on the podium and said, "We will bury you." And he might not have been wrong. And put his shoe back on. You'd had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Kennedy had sort of fumbled his way through that. I'm not willing to give that to Kennedy as a win. And by the way, you people can come for me on that. I'm not willing to give that to Kennedy as a win. I think there were a lot of other smarter, older people who surrounded him who were like, "Dude, just don't. Here's what you do." And he had the wisdom, by the way, even at his young age, in his 30s, to actually listen to people who were older than him. And Dr. Strangelove came out at a time when geopolitically no one had yet heard, to the degree they were going to hear in subsequent years, no one had heard of Vietnam. No one. We had soldiers in Vietnam. We were fighting a war in Vietnam, but no one had heard of Vietnam in 1964. No one. No one knew people were dying there. And people had been dying there since 1957. No one knew. And so all of those dynamics come together in Dr. Strangelove. And to me, what makes it a great science fiction film is the technological elements. So the B-17, the interior of the B-17, was so accurately created that apparently the Defense Department wanted to have a chat with Stanley Kubrick about how he got all that information about what the hell was in their B-17. So I'm a big fan of Dr. Strangelove, or the subtitle, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
So what one thing we didn't talk about in the last two films, well, the last segment of the conversation we're talking about, is the lessons that we're supposed to learn from are we supposed to talk about lessons about these films too, or are we just going to talk about the films?
Yeah, we can talk about lessons from these films. So I can tell you the lesson that I learned from Dr. Strangelove. Yeah, yes, they do. And yes, they do. Okay, somebody's texting me about something. Anyway, I love being a landlord now. I'm a landlord, by the way. I'm a landed man. I'm a man of land. Anyway, yes, we're supposed to be talking about the lesson. So King Kong, the lesson we can learn from King Kong and Godzilla, or The Day the Earth Stood Still, is when things are bigger than you may want to question them.
You may want to run and hide.
Sometimes that's a good move. Sometimes that's the move. Run and hide. Run screaming ahead of them. It's fine. From Dr. Strangelove, my God, like, the lessons are incredible. I mean, don't let crazy people take over your entire military industrial complex. I mean, when people say, "Oh, this one's real popular in our time," when people say the adults are in charge, like, let's actually make sure they're actually adults.
Yeah, right.
Because when there's a great scene in Dr. Strangelove where they're actually fighting in the war room, and I can't remember which character it is, but basically I think it's Peter Sellers as the president. He goes, gentlemen, there should be no fighting in the war room.
The irony.
Right. And it's one of those films that has become so, among certain people, it has become so popular, I guess is the term, right? That you don't consider that Kubrick was really angry when he put together that movie. He was angry at the idea of thermonuclear destruction. He was angry that the United States, from his perspective as a what we would call these days a progressive liberal, was not, sort of progressing towards, not necessarily communism, but progressing towards world peace, which is what he wanted. And, he was part of the movement that said, nuclear disarmament movement, that basically said, if we disarm, the Russians will disarm. And we were moving towards very much a position of what's called MAD, which everybody forgets about that term. But MAD was an acronym that stood for mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Where the United States had a certain number of nukes and the Russians had a certain number of nukes. And as long as there was no third party like China that had a certain number of nukes, we were fine. And that all kind of fell apart in the 1970s with China getting with China's long cultural revolution, and then Mao really agitating to get nuclear weapons from the Soviets, and they gave them to him. And then the United States pursued détente, and the United States was bogged down in Vietnam, which, by the way, China was involved in some of the aspects of Vietnam, which everybody forgets about that too. And so internationally, at a leadership level, there seemed to be, at the time of Dr. Strangelove in 1964, when this movie was released, because it was shot in 62, and probably edited in 63 and then released in 64, which means Kubrick came up with the idea probably in the late 1950s, early 1960s, right on the end of The Day the Earth Stood Still, that sort of period of sort of Red Scare kind of stuff. I think Kubrick wanted everybody to just sort of be shaken out of their ennui. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, so I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
No, actually, that one I have not seen. I've heard of it. I've heard lots of it, but I've never watched the film.
yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna pull it up on IMDb
Yeah.
here.
So it's funny. My number four would probably be, and you're probably gonna like Idiocracy. Like, I mean, how could you not watch that movie and feel like we talk so much about society in general, kids coming up these days, lack of intelligence, lack of emotional intelligence, really more so. There's and then you watch that movie and you go, oh, so that's where we're headed. Like it's like this is all starting to make sense to me now. Like the idea behind, and of
Isn't that
course,
the
if those
one
of
where
you,
like Luke Wilson goes to
yes,
sleep and he wakes up like it's like what's like 100 years later or 1,000 years later or something?
I forget the number, but yes, he wakes up whatever number of years later, and he's literally the smartest person on the planet.
So it's like
And,
the entire plot of Futurama. Remember that cartoon?
yes, yeah, exactly.
But like with no robots or whatever.
No,
Okay,
no, no, cool, no Bender, and there's no Bender in this movie, but like the idea, the thing that I found fascinating about the movie was that this average intelligence person now being the smartest person on the planet, like IQ level wise. And if you watch the movie, you figure out real quickly that even like he still tries to learn from the people around him. So you go back to the lessons that even if you are the smartest person in the room, that does not mean that you can't learn from the people around you. Just because they're not as smart as you are, they don't have as big of IQ, they don't have the subject matter expertise that you have. That doesn't mean you can't learn something from them. That's what that movie tells me. Now, if you actually go watch the movie, there's a lot more to it that is just ridiculousness. I'm just telling you, I'm preparing you for when you watch this movie that you are going to feel like you've lost a couple of brain cells watching this movie. But
I will be honest, just like you've never seen Dr. Strangelove, I've never seen Idiocracy.
I think you would appreciate where I'm coming from with this movie if you see it.
You're probably the seventh or eighth person in my life that has said to me, "You need to go see this movie. Hey son, how have you not watched this movie?" And then I don't know how I haven't watched the movie. I don't know. Maybe I need to just knuckle under and order it on HBO Max or Amazon or whatever and just watch it one day.
I wonder if part of it is the fact that you already have this preconceived notion by what people are telling you that the movie is utterly ridiculous. So you're not looking at it from a value add standpoint of I'm going to spend an hour and a half watching this movie. You're thinking I'm going to waste an hour and a half watching this movie. Totally different mindset when you look at it that way.
And the thing is, you'd be right. No, no, no. I think, like, I know what the plot is, right? So the guy falls asleep. He wakes up. and the whole
I don't
entire
think he falls.
country.
I think they put him in some cryogenic thing or something like that.
Okay.
I don't think he literally falls asleep. I think there's like a mechanism that puts him. Like I
Okay.
think
So
there's it's like this thing where everyone in the world is supposed to go this cryogen like the world's. I forget the very beginning of the movie. I remember the whole like the gist of it, and I remember like all there's some really some really idiotic things that happen in the middle. But the beginning of the movie, I can't remember if it's like the whole like something's detriment to the earth that's happening that in order to save the race they're supposed to put everybody in these cryo chambers or something like that, but he ends up being the only one that does it, and that thing that happens didn't destroy humanity. It basically changes humanity into a bunch of idiots, and
so I
then
think
he wakes up as the most intelligent person on the planet.
so I think I confused or not Doctor, sorry, Idiocracy with the with Judge Dredd. Weirdly enough, the scene in
Oh,
Judge Dredd where like
those are very different. Are
the
you thinking about Demolition Man too?
or maybe it is Demolition Man, right? The
Demolition Man, where
scene where
Wesley
the like
Snipes and
yeah.
Sylvester Stallone go into
Sylvester Stallone.
cryogenics, and then when they come back out, the world is
Right.
basically wussified.
Right. And there's been like fast food wars. That's what I associate Idiocracy with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like Taco Bell won the fast food wars. What?
yeah,
Talking
yeah.
about?
I think you're confusing them. No, Idiocracy is supposed to be a lot. There's a lot more comedy in it than that. Than
Okay.
Demolition Man, there was no comedy in that. That was action. That was action sci-fi,
Okay.
not comedy sci-fi. You know, as opposed to horror sci-fi or dramatic sci-fi. I don't know.
Here we go. Idiocracy. Okay. Oh, it was directed by Mike Judge, who directed Office Space. I should be all over this. Okay. I mean, I
Oh,
like
that
Mike
makes a lot of
Judge.
sense. Actually, I didn't realize it was the same director. I didn't make that connection. But yes, that makes total sense now.
I really do like Office Space. I really do like that movie. So
Same kind of comedy.
same kind of comedy.
Same kind
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, so that's my number four. And again, I have a hard time. I told you already. I have a hard time picking these lists in like numeric order because I don't know. I could probably think of three other movies that are equivalent to Idiocracy in two phases. Number one, the fact that they're labeled as sci-fi. Number two, they have a comedic undertone. And number three, they're just utterly ridiculous. So like Idiocracy and Galaxy Quest and like all those movies are in the same. They're all number four to me. That's all the same movie.
Evolution with David Duchovny back in the day. Oh,
Exactly.
everybody forgets about that movie that he did. Everybody forgets it was smack in the middle of him doing X-Files.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And then he was like, let's not remember that. And then he went back to X-Files. And I liked Galaxy Quest. I did like that movie. A lot.
I was pleasantly surprised with that movie. I actually liked it more than I thought I was going to. I felt like I wasn't supposed to like it, but I did.
Right. It is definitely one of those movies that came along at it. Well, it's kind of like Orville right now, the television show that Seth MacFarlane has. Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of one of those like once in a generation poke in the eye to Star Trek kind of films. And you can kind of get away with it because Star Trek's sort of beloved and is part of the zeitgeist and whatever. But it also doesn't make Galaxy Quest does not make assertions that it's high art or anything like that. Like
No.
they're not doing that. Tim Allen, you're not hiring Tim Allen for high art. I mean, for God's sake, this guy was Santa Claus. Like, let's be real here.
I mean, Galaxy Quest was to Star Trek is what Spaceballs was to Star Wars.
Yeah, there you go.
Essentially.
Okay. All right. Well, speaking of serious science fiction, my number 3 film is Blade Runner.
I like Blade Runner.
So I'm going to pull up Blade Runner here on IMDb because there's something I always try to point out here with Blade Runner, and I always miss it. And by the way, this is the Blade Runner from 1982. This is the original, the Blade Runner with Rutger Hauer and Harrison Ford, and I love the Tears in the Rain speech that Rutger Hauer gives at the end as the android, the replicant that's basically getting ready to be killed. And I was just looking at it the other day. It said, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. Time to die. And apparently, that entire last speech before he gets, eliminated was totally ad libbed. So, like, Harrison Ford's reaction to him was like, that was genuine. He's like, but that wasn't the script. What the hell are you talking about? Which is like the greatest thing ever. But then of course I modify that, like, and I modify it like for my kids because my kids have never seen Blade Runner, too young. But like, well, my younger kids are. My older ones probably have seen it. Well, my oldest son's seen it. He's not impressed. But I always modify it by saying, I've paid taxes for things you people wouldn't believe. And then you just go down the
My
law.
tax money disappears like tears in the rain.
Tears in the rain. But Blade Runner is one of those movies that I do reference a lot in 2024 because I fundamentally believe, and this is where I want to talk a little bit about dystopia and utopias in science fiction. So I reference this movie because in 2024, I believe we fundamentally are living the Blade Runner reality. We're living the Philip K. Dick Blade Runner reality. The only thing we're missing is the acid rain from the nuclear fallout. That's it. That's the only thing we're missing. That's it. Well, we have everything else.
In the death game, right? Like,
we can call that football. We've got everything else. We've got everything else.
Okay, sure.
We've got mass advertising that's stupid. We've got surveillance. We've got genetic manipulation. We've got people who are trying to biologically change themselves. We've got AI now, right? You could make an argument that we didn't have the AI, but we've got the AI now. Pretty soon, and this is going to be, we've got the internet. So we've got the instant communications, off planet, on planet, whatever. We've already cloned sheep. We did that in the 90s. And there are people who will say we never stopped cloning animals. We just stopped talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't popular. Like, what are we missing? Oh, and by the way, we have the dystopia. We have an incompetent government that has no solutions for how to solve problems other than to get rid of people, and will give you pleasure and desire and distraction in exchange for actually solving problems. What am I missing?
I mean, when you say it like that, what the hell, Hassan?
Like, I mean, I think Philip K. Dick nailed it. I think we're here. This is the future. We got the Blade Runner future we were looking for in 1982.
You know that I remember what was it? Somebody told me something in the book 1984, something like 70 something percent. They did the math. I don't know how the math plays out, but I mean 1984 was written what, in the 30s, 20s, 30s,
It was 40s. In the 40s, yeah.
In the 40s. And they said by the actual year 1984, about 2/3 of what was in that, or 3/4 of what was in that book actually came to fruition. So what you're talking about from 1982 until now sounds about right. It sounds about the same. Sounds about the same math.
Yeah. So 1984 was published June 8th, 1949.
49. Okay. So yeah, so 35 years. Yeah, like I said, the math works here. Yeah. So what you're saying from 1982, I mean, we're a little late. We're a little behind on the AI part, at least, but the rest of it, we're right on track.
Okay, so this gets us to this idea of dystopia. So a good friend of mine makes this point, and I think it is a dynamically interesting point, and I never really thought of it until he mentioned it. And this was years ago. I was ranting about something. It might have been Blade Runner. And he goes, it might have been. And he goes, listen, all dystopias are written from the perspective of the person and the time that they are in.
Yeah.
Because no one knows the future. So it's just projecting future anxieties onto a society that are really current anxieties. So if you go back and look at Philip K. Dick, you look at the short story, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That short story was written, let me pull up the date here, Um, let's see. It was written in 1968. Okay. What was going on in 1968? Well, again, it's kind of the same things that around that Dr. Strangelove sort of predicted, right? You had the communism, you had Vietnam, you had the threat of nuclear war, you had the promise of vacations to the moon. The Jetsons was on TV. We're all going to have vacations to the moon and robots, right? And so, what's the dark side of all? And Philip K. Dick being Philip K. Dick, what's the dark side of all this? And so he's going, of course, going to go in the dark side direction. He's not going to be like Isaac Asimov, who's going to be like, "Oh, there's 3 rules to dealing with robots." Like he's not going to, or Ray Bradbury, right, where the robots are going to be kind of hinted at in the background, but you're not really going to sort of bring them to the front because you don't really need to, because there's all different kinds of ways to do that. He wasn't that kind of writer. He was a writer who went right for, this is the horrible dystopia that I have anxiety about. And so all dystopias, this is the point that my buddy made, from the Blade Runner all the way to the Hunger Games and Divergent and all these other things, they're all about the now. They're all about the things that people are anxious about now. They're not actual projections of the future. And that was his entire point. He's like, this is why he doesn't like science fiction dystopias. He hates all of them. He's like, just make a regular movie about the things going on now that you're all anxious about. Just make that movie. And then we can all go home. I don't need the technological clone and sheep thing. I don't need that. This is boring. Just give me the thing you're anxious about. Oh, climate change. Fine. Make a movie about climate change. Which we did, actually. What was the name of that movie where the water came in? 2012 was?
Yeah. Oh, 2012 was one. Day After Tomorrow was another one.
Day After Tomorrow. There you go.
Day After Tomorrow. That was a fantastic. I liked that movie a lot, actually.
Yeah. Well, because it wasn't projecting the day after tomorrow to be like 100 years from now.
Right.
With like a bunch of replicants running around. It was like, no, it's going to be like, I don't know, a month from now.
and there wasn't it showed you most movies like that like this, like they show you what the dystopia is, right? Like, and then they have to explain how they got there. In The Day After Tomorrow, it showed you what the disaster was, not what the actual day after tomorrow looked like. That was left up to your imagination.
Right.
That's why I like that movie so much. It actually shows you how we get there and why we got there and why the world is so different, or why the world was going to be so different, but it never showed you the actual outcome. There was a brief thing at the very end. I don't know if you've seen this movie, right? With Dennis Quaid.
It's been a while. Yeah. Okay.
So Jake Gyllenhaal, they show you at the very end of the movie, when they zoom out from the world, like that polar ice cap now goes from the top of the world all the way down through 3/4 of the United States. Like, and it's not livable. Like, you can't live in basically. Now all the U.S. citizens have to
emigrate to Mexico. That's right. I remember that.
Get this, people. We asked Mexico permission to go live there.
That's right.
Yeah, but that movie, like, that's one of the reasons, exactly to what your friend is talking about. That's one of the reasons I absolutely love that movie, is because it actually gives you everything up front of what's going, like all the what happens and what goes wrong. In all these other movies, like to your point, even Blade Runner, it's after the fact, and they have to explain to you how they got there. Oh, we had a nuclear war, so now we have acid rain and all this other stuff, and this is why this happened. But there's details behind the back in the storyline of the movie that you have to figure out, and like how society ended up getting where they are. In that movie, in Day After Tomorrow, which now that you say it, that might be my number 1 or 2, by the way. I'm not sure yet, but I'm just thinking, like, now that I'm saying it out loud, because I didn't really put them in sci-fi, but it definitely is. There's no doubt it's sci-fi.
Okay.
But my number 3 would have been I'm not going to pick one of them, because I think there are several in the series that are really good. Nope. Some better than others, of course. But it was also before its time, was Alien. 1979, Alien came out with Sigourney Weaver.
Ridley Scott.
Yes.
So Ridley Scott's Alien.
I watched that. So in 1979, it came out. I didn't watch it until probably 10 years after, because I thought the second one, Aliens, was actually better than the first one.
Yeah.
The second one came out like 6 or 8 years later or something like that. It took a long time to get that second movie. Now there's, I don't know, there's 15 of them in the series, whatever. I don't care how many of them are.
It's a mess. It's a mess over there.
But
It's a
yeah, but
terrible
now,
thing.
well, because they're doing all this BS with the aliens universe, right? So now you have to have 15 movies to have your own universe in the movie genres, like the MCU universe, and it's ridiculous, right? Even Godzilla, by the way, we were talking about Godzilla a few minutes ago. Now they talk about the Monarch universe, which Monarch was the U.S. or the worldwide equivalent of some sort of secret agency that was monitoring these giant monsters or whatever. Like, so Monarch, right. And there's actually a series, I forget if it's on Apple TV or Hulu or something, but there's on one of the streaming services, actually a series called Monarch.
Okay.
That is actually an extension of the Godzilla movies. But again, so now everyone has this, like, you can't just make a movie and walk away anymore. You have to make a movie and then have a universe for the movie to exist in. So anyway, but the point is, Alien 1979 started this whole thing with Alien versus Predator. Prometheus was a part of the Aliens universe, like a lot of these movies. So I think number 3 for me was I'm just going to pick that universe.
Yeah.
I do think Aliens, which was the second one, was probably one of my all-time favorites. It might have something to do with when I watched it, because the first time I ever watched it, I was a kid. And I've since watched it a few times since, but I just remember thinking, I wonder if alien races are really like this. Like, we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble if these are what aliens are really like.
Hello. So I'm going to do some shilling here, and hopefully this will be a pause in our riveting conversation for you. I have an offer for you. My most recent book is 12 Rules for Leaders, the Foundation of Intentional Leadership. It's available in paperback, hardcover, or as an ebook on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and any other place you order books. Now, in this book, I address the 12 leadership areas that I have found leaders need to be the most intentional in to be the type of leader followers actually want to follow. From establishing a foundation of leading teams through managing conflict effectively, all the way through leading teams through change, knowing what to do and why to do it can help readers, like the ones listening to this show, become better leaders. Look, reading this book and living it is like getting coaching from me directly without having to pay my full coaching rate. Head on over to leadershiptoolbox.us, that's leadershiptoolbox.us, and scroll down the homepage and click on the Buy Now button to purchase in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle format on Amazon 12 Rules for Leaders, the foundation for intentional leadership. And that's it for me. Now back to the show. Okay, so I watched Alien. I watched the first movie, the Ridley Scott movie from the 1970s, when I was probably about 15 years old. And originally it landed in my head as a combination of, remember 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Yes.
So, like, all of the worst parts of 2001: A Space Odyssey that I didn't like, because I was on an anti-Kubrick kick, whatever. But all of the parts of that combined, without Dave the computer, take Dave the computer out, or you put Dave the computer inside the android, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. And then you throw in this monster movie aspect from the alien creature. And I thought, and yeah, I mean, you got the jump scares with the thing coming out of the belly and whatever, and the acidic, whatever. And then I thought, you know what? Do I care enough to have an opinion about this movie? And I decided I didn't. Okay, fine. So I went away. Many years later, came back, watched Aliens with Sigourney Weaver, which, by the way, much more of an action film because it was directed by James Cameron.
Right.
Which is, it totally, like, no one ever talks about this, but James Cameron was the B director to Ridley Scott. Like, that's weird, right? Like,
Yeah,
and,
for
and
sure.
then the subsequent movies, James Cameron's never been invited back to direct another Aliens film.
Which is weird because that one was better than I think that one was better. I thought the second one, Aliens, was a
Right.
better movie.
And in that film, you get Sigourney Weaver, you get her, female, I'm going to say this, female badass with the, running around, and it's woman versus woman and woman versus nature. And so you're trying to make all these illusions, right? And Newt is in there, and it spawned a whole bunch of comic books. Dark Horse Comics, basically, their entire company existed because of Aliens, and quite frankly, Predator, who's another movie that no one ever talks about, which I like Predator better, but that's a whole other different kind of thing. But I thought, to your point about if we run into something like this, we're in trouble. I thought, and it came out subsequent because I watched Prometheus, right?
Mhm.
And I got so mad in the middle of that movie. So angry. I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm out. And I sat there in anger for the last 45 minutes of that movie, just seething. Because to your point about the universe, part of developing a cinematic universe is you have to retcon other films that existed before you decided to make the cinematic universe to make it fit into the narrative. And it never works
Yeah,
because we already
yeah,
have that other narrative in our head. So now I'm annoyed. So now you're showing me like alien eggs and babies and
yeah. I thought
ancient
I thought I thought
spacemen. And I'm like,
Prometheus was an awkward left turn, right? Like it was just it.
I'm
Now
out.
the
I'm
funny
out.
part was I liked the movie up until that part. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I get it, whatever. And then once it started showing and I'm like, wait a minute. And then they did the same thing with Predator, by the way. So
Yeah.
I do agree. I actually like Predator a lot. It was one of I was again a kid growing up watching military people overcome that Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse the Body Ventura, Carl Weathers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
had action heroes in there, and I was like, yes, like all these guys are like, I want to be with them. If the world's coming to an end, I want to be with them too. Like I
Oh
was
yeah.
that girl that was like, don't leave me here. I'm coming with you. Like
Right. Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
totally get it.
I'm going with Carl Weathers.
Right. You got Carl Weathers, Jesse Ventura, and Arnold Schwarzenegger with a whole bunch of guns.
Right.
You're gonna say no, leave me here? Hell no. I'm going with you guys if the world's coming. If the feces is hitting the fan, I'm going with you. Like no. Anyway, but then you even then like even the second Predator movie and the third like when the Predator gets dropped in the middle of Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
fine. I had no problem with that. Like okay, sure. So it didn't work in the jungle. Put him in a city or the suburbs, whatever. Fine. But I felt the same way. Like you're talking about Prometheus when they started doing the whole Alien versus Predator kind of dynamic. And I don't
Yeah.
know if you remember this one, but there was one where they had to excavate like some sort of pyramid in the Arctic. And
Oh yeah.
when they got down there, they realized, oh, wait a minute. So these predators, that's why they're called predators, because they prey on these other aliens. These aliens prey on these aliens. In order for you to your coming of age is to go kill one of them. Like that
Right.
whole thing was, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what are we
Right.
doing here? Like,
Right.
it just seems very weird. Like, so to your point with the whole you just have to, you're taking bits and pieces from all these other movies and you're trying to force feed a universe down our throat.
Right, exactly. And I don't need that. I don't need that.
Yeah.
And then to your point about aliens, and is this actually what alien life would be? Here's the thing. Neil deGrasse Tyson would tell us if he were here right now.
I can't wait.
Um,
Tell me what you would say. Because
here's what he would say. Here's what he would say. That's all fantasy, and it doesn't matter because there is no intelligent life in the universe other than us. There's none. And even if there is intelligent life, it's so far away from us, we can never get there. We just can't. We can't cross the distances. We can never get there. And if they can cross the distances to get here, they're probably so super intelligent that why the hell would they bother with us?
Hmm.
And so we would be to them as ants are to us. And no one's crossing the street to deal with an anthill. We just drive past it. We don't care. We're like, I don't know what's going on over there. And the ants aren't building rockets to come talk to us. They're hanging around the anthill. Like they're doing ant stuff in an anthill. That's what Neil deGrasse Tyson would say. Now, with that being said, I do think that the idea of, and I've often struggled with this, just even in my religious, sort of wiring, not sort of my religious wiring. I don't know why a creator would build a gigantic universe like this that we're aware of, by the way. Like, it's not like it's like there's a great scene at the end of the first Men in Black, right? Where the aliens are
Yes.
playing marbles.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
When I saw
That
that,
scene was actually eye opening for me. I actually thought I watched that and went, God damn it, that could actually like how would we know if that was really happening? Like we wouldn't even know.
we would have no idea.
Oh,
We would have no idea. Well,
damn it, Will Smith.
and that's part of the idea that like all of and this is Elon Musk pushes this idea that all of reality is a simulation and we're all just trapped inside some test tube on some kid's desk in Cleveland.
So Elon Musk is basically saying we are actually in the Matrix.
Right, but it's a matrix that's being run inside of to the point about the end of Men in Black, inside of another set of matrices, that are all stop. At a certain point, we're getting out of control. We got to quit.
Yeah,
we can see the universe. We are smart enough to build technology that can perceive where we are at in the universe, and it is vast. And up to this point, anyway, empty of intelligence other than us. That's it. That's all we know for sure. So because that's all we know for sure, what the hell? Let's backfill it with aliens. Let's backfill it with predators. Let's backfill it with Vulcans and Klingons and Star Wars things. Sure, let's backfill the entire freaking thing. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because whatever it is we find, like I am convinced in the next 100 to 150 years, we will do some kind of, at some technological level, we will do some kind of foothold. We will get some kind of foothold as a globe on Mars. We will get some kind of, I think Elon's right on that. We will get some kind of foothold on Mars, 150 years out, I think. I think we have to go through, I think we have to have a close run on a war or a major war to sort of click us over into that. But I think that's going to happen. If it doesn't happen this time around, there's going to be another time around where the tensions will rise and we'll get there. Anyway, and that's about 150 years. I mean, the average human seculum cycle is 80 years. 280-year cycles is 160 years. There you go. So in 160 years, we will wind up on Mars. For sure. I believe that absolutely for sure. After that, who the hell knows? I mean, like the moons of Jupiter are kind of interesting. The moons of Saturn are kind of interesting. I do fundamentally believe that there are wild things out there that we're not prepared for. Are those wild things what we would conventionally assume is life? No. And I don't know that we're ready to see any of that. So could we run into some egg-laying alien thing? Hell yeah. Yeah, we could run into that. Sure, why not? But I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm going to be kind of annoyed because I'm living now. I'm living in 2024 right now. And I'm not going to Mars. I'm not going to make it. My generation, we're not going to make it. Tom's of the same generation, we're not going to Mars.
All I'm saying is, in my original statement and starting this whole spiral, was that I felt like Aliens was ahead of its time. If you think about like the other movies in the 70s and 80s, I really did think Aliens, because if you think about Aliens, what the alien looked like and what it looked relatively the same throughout the whole course of the Aliens universe.
Yeah.
But like, they didn't make a lot of changes to it. Whereas, again, if you go back to Godzilla 1960 was vastly different than the last Godzilla movie. You know, like it's not even the same. They made a lot of changes to it. CGI helped out with a lot of that, whatever, right? So that's all I was getting at. I liked the idea. Like when I was a kid, that movie was way better to me than most of the other sci-fi movies that were around. I mean, think about Total Recall. Come on. Come on. Inner Space. You want to talk about a comedic one? Inner Space with Martin Steve the small dude.
What's his name?
Rick Moranis.
Rick Moranis. Yeah.
Rick Moranis. Yeah. Rick Moranis. Inner Space. That was kind of funny. But again, the technology was very choppy and very weird looking. There's some weird stuff that happened there.
Well, to talk about anxiety and
Weird
choppiness
science.
and weird science, my my second greatest of my top five greatest science fiction films, my second greatest science fiction film, I want to go on record for Hasan, the second greatest science fiction film of all time is the 1968 version of the Pierre Boulet novel, written by the guy who wrote Twilight Zone, Rod Serling, Planet of the Apes.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't know what's going on with the modern ones. I haven't watched any of those. I don't care about any of those.
I
I don't care
watched
about any
the
of those.
first. I watched the very first one. I couldn't do the rest. I just couldn't do
I
it.
can't get suckered in. And I couldn't get that Mark Wahlberg thing, that hideous Tim Burton Mark Wahlberg thing back in the 90s. I did watch that, and I promised myself never again after that, and I've never been sucked back in again.
Exactly. Yeah, it was bad.
You can't beat Rod Serling's writing. You just can't.
That
It
was
was
a great movie.
it was the first movie I ever watched where like it sucked me in so much that when Charlton Heston finally realized where he was at with the Statue of Liberty scene on the beach, my
Iconic. That was
my
iconic. That
my,
scene.
my stomach dropped out of my like my gut dropped.
Yeah.
I was like, it got me. It got me. And I'm watching this movie in like the mid 1990s. It got me. I had heard about the ending and I knew about the ending and it still suckered me in. It still got me. Um,
Well, the other thing too is if you think about that, like, so something that I want to make sure everybody listening here clearly understands. Like Charlton Heston was in that movie.
right,
Like,
Moses.
yeah, like this is not Mark Wahlberg, people. This is like Academy Award winning. Like this guy was like legit one of the best actors of all time. Like,
Moses, the Omega Man.
yeah, exactly. Like this, I, you know, I got to admit that. I mean, I would find it hard pressed for me to pick a different number two. I'm just saying, I was.
it when Charlton Heston says, "Get your paws off me, you damn dirty ape," like that's and the apes respond and they're like, it's the level of seriousness that Charlton Heston brought to that material and elevated Serling's material with. Um, and then the whole entire, and by the way, the whole entire plot of the movie and of the book, but of the movie could have been camp. It really could have gone into camp. And Heston just, by showing up, me and Charlton Heston just didn't allow it. He's like, no, we're not going to be camp. We're just not going to do that. Whereas I've seen a couple of the trailers for the thing that Matt Reeves is doing now. And I'm just like, it's not camp, but it would be better if it were. Honestly, it would be a little bit more palatable if it were. Because here's the thing. And this gets back to the whole idea of King Kong. Honestly, this is why I wanted to bring up Planet of the Apes. But we have ever since Darwin's theory of evolution, we have had such a we're stunned by the fact that the apes haven't evolved to where we are. We are quite frankly stunned by that. Like, we're quite frankly stunned that there's a gap. Like, why aren't there two dominant human species on the planet? Like, we don't understand that. Like, I'm fascinated by Neanderthals, quite frankly. I'm fascinated by the entire thing. I read up on Neanderthals. I did a whole bunch of research on them a couple of years ago. Read everything I could get my hands on about Neanderthals. And basically, modern humans, which are technically speaking Cro-Magnons, whatever that may mean, we basically ethnically cleansed the Neanderthals. We destroyed another species on the planet that was also humans, and we're fine with it. Yeah, we're fine with it. We're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, we outbred them. Some of them interbred with Cro-Magnons, which is why people look a certain way, or maybe even have certain IQs that they have. Maybe people think that. No, people do think that. There's also we also hunted them, maybe even for food, because there was a whole lot of cannibalism that has gone on throughout all of human history. across all races, ethnic groups, geographies, doesn't matter. Religious observations doesn't matter. Cannibalism apparently is very popular. I'm not going to get into that. Maybe one day we'll do an episode top 5 Hason's top 5 cannibal movies, and I do have top 5 cannibal movies. I do. Well, anyway, I won't get into all that. My wife would be like, "You can't talk about any of that on air. That's terrible. That's verboten. No one will listen after that." Anyway.
You will lose listeners, Hasan. You will lose listeners.
You will lose.
Start talking about The Hills Have Eyes. So, I'm sorry, I had to.
Ravenous is actually a really good movie. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, that is something that Cro-Magnons, was it like 16,000 years ago or whatever? Like we just eliminated another human species. And so we've taken all of that anxiety and we just put it on the monkeys. And the thing about the monkeys is they seem to just insist on just continuing to be monkeys. Like they're fine with that. They're like, yeah, I don't know, we're gorillas. We're gorillas and chimpanzees and orangutans. We're cool. We're just hanging out here. And so I am convinced, number one, I think that is the strongest argument actually against evolution, is the fact that the monkeys are still monkeys. I think that's one of the stronger arguments against evolution.
Didn't Paul Giamatti play an orangutan?
He did.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's so good. But then the second strongest argument is that we had 2 human species and we destroyed one. So that's the second good argument against evolution. And then the third good argument is anything you see in Planet of the Apes, where we give the apes intelligence and then they just kill us all. They just destroy us. There's a war or whatever, and Matt Reeves insists on going back, speaking to your point about universes. Oh, now we got to go retcon how we all want, because this is the thing. Everybody in the new Planet of the Apes movies is waiting for the movie where Charlton Heston shows up. That's what we're all waiting on. Just bring us Charlton Heston already. Or Mark Wahlberg, bring Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, whoever the hell you bring. Just bring the white guy on the ship.
Who would be today's version of Charlton Heston though? Like who would we get? John Hamm maybe? Like who would we get to play that role?
John Hamm, get the hell out of town. He's got the jawline.
That was a joke. That was a total joke.
He's got the jawline, but not much else. No, I mean, who do we get? No, well, see, okay. In our time, it can't be a white guy. So it has to be like Kevin Hart. Or The Rock or something.
Okay, the Rock's at least okay, maybe. Maybe The Rock. Kevin Hart though? Come on. Will Smith even. Come on. Kevin Hart, he's not
Samuel L. Jackson. It'll be Sam Jackson. It'll be Sam Jackson that steps out of the spaceship.
No, screaming. Actually, no. You know who would be really cool? I don't know why I like him so much, but Lawrence Fishburne. I think Lawrence Fishburne.
Oh, there you go.
Stepping out of that spaceship, that would be cool for me.
He's a poor man. He's a poor man's Denzel Washington. Yeah, we'll go with him.
I'd rather him over Denzel any day. Maybe that just shows that I grew up poor. I don't know. That's fine. I don't care. I'll tell the world. I'm not ashamed of that.
Well, I grew up wealthy, and I'll take Denzel.
Exactly.
No. I think it has to be one of those guys in our time, or it's got to be some female actress. Like, I don't know, pick a female actress here, because it can't be a white guy anymore. We can't have Charlton Heston. We're not allowed. So we're gonna have a woman. It's gonna be a woman. So it'll be some woman. I don't know, some female. The girl. Sorry, girl. The woman who was just the female lead in Twisters. I just saw that movie.
Oh no, it'll probably be like Anna Sawai or something like that.
Yeah, there you go.
From Shogun. From Shogun.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, she just won an Emmy. Why not? Let's give her let's give her the role.
She's 5'3", 105 pounds. Of course, she could fight a friggin' gorilla.
Yeah, but 5'3", 100 pounds, and she's a samurai. She'll kick some ass.
No, it'll be fine. She'll have a sword. That's the only technology we'll allow on the ship.
Oh God! All right, so where are we on this thing now? We're at number 2, right?
We're number two. We're number two.
Okay.
So my number 2 was Planet of the Apes. What's your number 2?
See, I kind of go back and forth. I actually think 2001 Space Odyssey from 1968, or I go back and forth between that and The Fly. Like I thought The Fly was really I actually did. I thought it was well done, and it wasn't supposed to be in the horror genre. It was supposed to be sci-fi, but it scared the crap out of a lot of people.
So which
It really
which
did.
which version of The Fly? The one with Jeff Goldblum, where he's like in the thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, because there's another version from like back in the day. Okay. So, wow, The Fly, or I wouldn't go there, Dave. So, okay, all right. So tell me why 2001? Because I was frustrated with that movie, unbelievably frustrated with that movie. But I'm frustrated with Kubrick in general as a director. Like he drives me crazy. I have to watch Kubrick directed films like 2001 or Doctor Strangelove. Full Metal Jacket, I got right off the bat. Like I understood what he was doing right off the bat. But Eyes Wide Shut, like any of those kinds of films that he directed, I have to watch. That one that he did about the French, not the French Revolution, the guy who was running around during the American Revolution or the French Revolution, and it was Ryan whatever, and he's got the wig. I can't remember the name of the friggin' movie. Um, Ryan O'Neal was in it back in the day. I'll come up with it in a minute here. I'll look on my phone. But I've watched like half that movie and I fall asleep because I'm like, I'm done. Like I can't. No, Kubrick, I don't know what you're doing here. So I struggle with Kubrick films, right? I struggle with him as director. Um, oh, the one A Clockwork Orange.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell my Clockwork Orange story very quickly. I watched A Clockwork Orange 4 times on VHS and 1 time on DVD, and I did not understand what the hell was going on in that movie. And then for a time in my life, I worked as a projectionist. By the way, kids, for those of you who are listening, who are below a certain age, a projectionist was a person who actually put together physical film. You got film in cans, and you
You know that
wound them
noise that
together.
happens? That's
Yeah,
when the film runs out.
the film runs out. I was responsible for that. And you used to have celluloid, which was highly stable, and then silver nitrate, which would fall apart, right? And I worked at an old movie house in Detroit that showed classic movies, and so I watched a lot of classic films that way. But we got a silver nitrate copy of A Clockwork Orange, and when you were a projectionist, you had to put the movie together, and then because sometimes you didn't know where the cuts were correctly, because a projectionist is sort of Martin Scorsese has said this, and some other directors, but a projectionist is kind of like the final editor, which is why most directors are glad that George Lucas sort of eliminated all of us and now it's all digital anyway, because they don't want us touching their stuff. And so we would cut and paste the films together, cut and tape the films together. So I knew how to do, I only knew how to do all that back in the day. I still do, still have those skills. Anyway, so I would have to watch the movie to make sure that I didn't, tape in a reel upside down or something, which by the way, sometimes you could do that. Anyhow, so I put together a silver nitrate version of Clockwork Orange, and it was an original version from whenever that movie came out. And I watched it and I was like in the theater, and I went, got it. I understand it now. It took me like 8 times to watch A Clockwork Orange and actually understand what was going on in that movie. That's my problem with Kubrick. Like you're inscrutable as a director. I have no clue. And by the way, the actors don't matter. The story doesn't matter, because he was sort of all over the place with his genres and what he did. The thing that united it is it's Stanley Kubrick's vision of what he wants to put forth for reality. So that's my Clockwork Orange story. Anyway, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Why did you like this? I'm always fascinated by other people. What struck you about that movie versus The Fly?
Let's back up for a second, because I'm not suggesting that I loved the movie itself, right? Like I'm just thinking, when you had sent this to me and I started thinking about movies, I was thinking more of like iconic movies that like that should be on the list, I guess. Like probably movies that I wouldn't have to defend all that much. Like you know what I mean? Like so that's really what like I said, I kind of went back and forth. If I'm thinking of like the best, or what would be considered the best films of all time in this genre. So it's not that I personally have an attachment to it like that, like you're asking. That being said, I did think the depiction of AI in that was way beyond its time, right?
Okay.
That's probably the thing that stood out to me the most when I was like, And by the way, the oh shit factor today, right? Like we were talking about, when 1984 was written in 1949, and then the year of 1984 came, and you look at that book and how many things of that book actually came to fruition. Like it was very high number, 70.
Yeah.
It's like 77% of all the things that he wrote in that book in 1984 came true. 2001 Space Odyssey, we're pretty darn close to saying that that movie is real. Same thing that you were just talking about, the whole Blade Runner thing. Think about, we're now, by the way, people, we're talking to our homes. Like we're walking around our house.
We are.
Hey, what was that joke I heard the other day about the rabbit in the hat? Like, and the Siri's going to go, what does a rabbit, like so that's kind of why I'm thinking of some of that stuff. Like,
so wait, why won't the tech companies then call the AI Dave, or let the AI call you?
Did you see? Did I ask you this before? Did you see the movie Jexy?
No. What is that?
Oh, what is that? Son, what is wrong with you, my friend?
I'm watching. I'm writing it down.
I got to be honest with you. That one, even before Idiocracy.
Okay.
The premise of this movie is this. The phone takes over this dude's life. Like the phone takes him over. Like, he pisses the phone off. Like Jexy is essentially Siri, right?
Yeah.
So he pisses it off somehow, and he's like, Jexy, set my alarm for work for 7:20 a.m. 7:20 a.m. comes, the alarm doesn't go off. He wakes up late for work. He's like, Jexy, what happened to that alarm? She's like, that'll teach you next time to piss me off, or whatever. Like
2019. Okay, I got it. I found it. Go ahead.
The kid that's in it is not a huge star, but he's been in a couple of movies. He's been in Pitch Perfect, I think, with Anna Kendrick, and then he was also in was it Dave and Dave Find or Need Wedding Dates or something, like, I forget what it is, but he's been in a couple movies, and he always plays a comedic role. So, but Jexy, that movie was hilarious. I was dying half of that movie. I was like, if this ever happens for real, we're in big trouble. Like,
Ron Funkus is in it, the comedian. Wanda Sykes is in it. And Rose Byrne. Rose Byrne plays Jexy. She's okay.
Rose Byrne plays Jexy's voice. Yeah, she's hilarious. The whole movie is funny. It's great. Anyway, okay. So back to my point about 2001. So the idea here is like I was thinking of it more like that. Like, the book 1984. Come 1984, we get all this stuff happening. The same thing. Like I thought about like Star Trek, the series Star Trek. Like when we think about all the stuff that we now have today, that was. Somebody watched that show as a kid and said, I'm going to invent that someday. That's kind of what my mindset was with Space Odyssey. The Fly was just creepy as hell. Like that. Like I said, that movie I don't think was supposed to be labeled as sci-fi. I think it was supposed to be in the horror genre, but it is sci-fi. If you think about how, like, the teleportation thing, but like all this, it was definitely science in there. And so I'm not sure which one I would put, number two, but I do think both of those two are very iconic sci-fi movies.
So let's see. So we've got Godzilla and King Kong universe for Tom. We've got Idiocracy. We've got the Alien universe, and then we've got a tie between 2001 Space Odyssey and The Fly. Those are your top four. Okay.
So far, I mean, again,
so far. So far, he had trouble coming up with a list. It's okay. It's good. And then let's see.
There's just too many of them. My problem is I love this genre of movies. That's my biggest problem. I'm just letting you know.
I'm going to, well, don't worry. Next February, we're going to do the top 5 romantic films. We're going to do that. Top 5 romances. Okay. So I've got The Day the Earth Stood Still, Doctor Strangelove, Blade Runner, and Planet of the Apes. Okay. Speaking of Star Trek, my number one sci-fi film of all time is a movie that I actually just watched when I was in the hotel traveling, interesting enough, to Boston a couple weeks ago.
Tell me it's Wrath of Khan.
Of course. Please. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan. That has got to be the best sci-fi movie ever made.
Ever. Come on. Of all time. My God.
Come on. This is a great movie.
It's got everything. It's got Shatner being old and retired and angry. It's got Bones wanting to just stay home and not be bothered. It's got you know,
Got,
Spock being Spock.
got Ricardo Montalban. Oh, that dude was awesome in
with
that
that
movie.
great chest, which was his, by the way. That wasn't prosthetic. That was Ricardo Montalban. Like he was. And then here's the thing, and I didn't find this out until recently. So this last year we covered the book Moby Dick, right? And I'm reading Moby Dick and all this and whatever. And there's lines in Moby Dick, and I'm like, wait, I've read these before. I've heard these before somewhere. And so I go back and I'm like wrapping my brain, right? My fertile mind. I'm like, Star Trek. And so I went back and did a little research. And turns out the guy who wrote Wrath of Khan based it off of Moby Dick. Based the entire subplot of Ricardo Montalban chasing around William Shatner, or chasing around William Shatner.
The white whale,
The
yeah.
white whale. And so we put the lines from Captain Ahab in Ricardo Montalban's mouth. I'm like, this is brilliant. This is an example of somebody reading classic literature and then applying it in a pop culture context so that the literature can expand. Then you've got the ship. Oh, the Kobayashi Maru test. Like,
yeah,
all of that's there. And it's so well balanced. It's so well done. Yes. Well acted. Yes, Spock dies at the end, but it doesn't matter. But you don't know that because it still has emotional punch. It still has emotional punch. You don't know there's a Star Trek 3 coming. You don't know that. And it's even so good. It has entered the lexicon of comedy. So I remember an episode of Seinfeld. I can't remember which episode it was, but Jerry was talking about how Star Trek 2, him and George were talking about at the coffee shop, I think. And they were like, Star Trek 2 Wrath of Khan is the greatest thing ever. Blah, 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 blah. And or Jerry says, Kramer doesn't believe Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan is like the best Star Trek movie ever. He likes Star Trek 3. He likes Search for Spock. He's a weirdo. I'm just like, that's brilliant. That's genius. It is a movie that almost didn't get made because after Star Trek the Motion Picture, the returns were so bad on that movie. Everybody was like, oh, we're never gonna, Star Trek's dead. We're done. And it literally singularly resurrected Star Trek movies for another like 30 years. That movie just by itself. I've had my kids watch Wrath of Khan. My kids love it. Gen Zers. They are Gen Zers. They're hardcore Gen Zers. And they loved Wrath of Khan.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think Wrath of Khan, I started racking my brain again. This genre is probably my favorite, because of the flexibility in the genre. I just want to be clear, because you got things like E.T. and Contact with Jodie Foster, and then of course we're not even talking about any of the modern movies, the Avatars of the world that that people can love them or hate them, but they're going to be iconic at some point, right? Like some of these movies are just massive build outs of storyline and movie. So like in undertones, like the whole idea, the original Avatar movie with and I've said this to people before. Let me get this straight. You've never heard this story before? A race of people finds something of value that's already inhabited by a race of people, or at least, a race, and they go and they destroy them to get it. You haven't heard this story at all? But anyway, but the point I'm making is like
Fern Gully just in real life.
Yeah, Fern Gully, exactly. Love that movie, by the way. Robin Williams was incredible in that movie. If anybody has not seen Fern Gully, watch it with your kids. Like, that's great. But again, there's a lot of the Matrix was another one, right? Like the Matrix. We talked about the Matrix a little bit. Like, but when you're talking about like iconic sci-fi, The Day the Earth Stood Still, the Space Odyssey, like these are like above and beyond. Like my biggest thing, and I try to explain this to my kids all the time, when you watch a movie like Back to the Future or E.T. or whatever, any one of the acting is better.
Yes.
Most times, because they're not reliant on special effects and CGI.
Right.
So like Avatar is a great movie. I love that. I actually really like that movie. There was a lot of for those of you who have listened to this podcast several times, and I'm not going to go into super detail why, you probably can already see this coming. I know Hassan can,
Mhm.
but there were parts of that touched inside of me that some movies just don't. Right now, I watched this movie and I was just like, what is going on right now, and why are we okay with this? Like, I really like. I could get emotionally wrapped up in that movie because of the underlying story, like the undertones of the story. Whereas you like in most of these movies that we're talking about today, these are movies where the CGI was non-existent or very early stage, and it's choppy and it wasn't very good, and the special effects were very manual, and it was it was just weird. Some that came across people watching today's movies, and then they go back and watch some of these the movies that we're talking about. They're not going to like. My kids don't really like a lot of the old movies. They don't get it. They don't get it. They don't get the fact that these to your point a couple of times, like, these stories are based on how people were feeling at the time. Can you get the underlying tones that are in these movies based on the actors and actresses that are portraying the characters? Charlton Heston in Planet of the Apes was the best one, like that, one of the best ones I can think of. Like, so we're talking about we did. I think if we chop that, we could probably chop this episode of this podcast up into like 3 different versions, because I think that there's something to be said about today's sci-fi versus yesterday's sci-fi versus the original sci-fi, right? Like, I think if we could probably pick the top 5 movies in that way, or we could separate it into sci-fi comedy, sci-fi drama, sci-fi, sci-fi.
Well,
Horror.
I think I think you've got a point there. I mean, so when I look at my top 5 list, and by the way, I'll be totally completely honest, I came up with this top 5 list in like 10 minutes.
Yeah,
because I'm that guy, right? It didn't take me long, but you're right. Like, my top 5 list, even your top 5 list, driven by writing. And this is the thing, like, we're a literature podcast, right? What are the leadership lessons people can learn from great writing? People get caught up in movies in the visuals, as well they should, right? The visual, because it's a visual medium, right? But when you go so far over, and you see this with the Marvel movies, right? This is why everyone's burned out on superhero movies now and no one cares anymore. The reason people are burned out on that is because the visuals are so amazing that they are thought to be enough to carry the story. And it's just not. Like, maybe for certain things, like Godzilla versus Mothra versus King Kong. Okay, we all know what we're here for. We're not being fooled. Even with something like probably one of the better written Marvel movies was Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
Oh, for sure, yes.
With the special effects, that was a place where the writing and the special effects actually came together and actually worked.
It's one of the few I actually watched.
Right. Then for every single,
I just refused for a long time. I'm like, I'm not watching these movies. I'm sorry.
But then for every one of those, though, you have a Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which was just trash. My daughter went and saw that, and she was like, I don't know what we're doing here, right? And it's because the writing isn't supporting, it is the structure, the infrastructure of the writing isn't there in the story. Wrath of Khan is my number 1 film on my list, and it didn't even, I started with that one.
Yeah.
Because of the writing. The writing is good. The iconic lines are good. And this has been one of my beefs with Hollywood for a long time, and it's not just in science fiction. It's in a lot of other different genres too. This is everywhere. When you're making movies and writing for movies based on what your Twitter feed looks like, or who's going to give you claps on social media, you're writing insularly from your friends. So you have no experience to write from. Like the guys who wrote Wrath of Khan, they had life experience. Just like, quite frankly, the guys who wrote, to go into a totally different genre and a totally different place, the people who wrote French Connection or Serpico, or even, I'll go a step further, a movie that's very stylized, very classical, but everybody quotes from it, Godfather.
Number 2. The second one.
Well, We'll leave that aside for just a minute. We'll just say Godfather and leave it at that.
Okay.
The writing, except for Godfather 3, the writing is strong. The
Yes.
writing is strong. The writing is what carries it. But you see a fall, a definite, you see a definite fall off in writing after I think about 2010. And I don't know if that's because writers shifted to television or television offered more opportunities and streaming or whatever. But I just know that the writing that we've gotten over the last 15 years or so hasn't been good. Even The Matrix was a little bit of a mess. And I liked The Matrix back in the 90s. But
Yeah.
even there was like, you're trying to do too many things. You're trying to be too cute by half. Like just write a good solid story. And I think we've forgotten that. And as a literature podcast, I support good writing. So there we go. I support good writing.
I'm with you. And again, I like I said, I would, again, I'm going to pick on Avatar a little bit, but the second one,
Mm-hmm.
not good. It was not as good. Like we waited years for this movie to come out. We had such high expectations of it, and it just did not. It wasn't written as good. It wasn't written as well.
Okay,
It just
so
wasn't.
I watched the first Avatar movie. I did. I watched it in the
Yeah.
theater, and I was like, okay, this is fine. I mean, I know the story. It's fine. It's cool. I don't know anybody who saw the second movie other than you. You're like the first person that I've met. Literally, you are. You're the first person I've met who watched that movie. I don't know how this movie made like, what is it, $500 bajillion that it made?
Yeah, I don't know either because it was not very good. It was like the writing on it was not very good, honestly. I don't know what we waited for. Like that's kind of my point. And by the way, that happens a lot. Even with the deterioration of the writing quality, it gets worse as they go. It almost naturally, right? Like so, even the Matrix, I thought the first one was way better than the second. I thought the second
Oh yeah,
one was really not very good. By the time they got to the third one, I watched the third one. I went, "What are we doing here, people?" Like, you know
right.
what I mean? So, like the right, and that happens in just about everyone. I mean, with one exception, I think, because you made a statement a few minutes ago, like with the Godzilla movie, right? Like with
Mm-hmm.
the Godzilla, we're not as worried about the writing because we know what we're in for, right? Like we know what we're
Right.
here for. I feel that way about John Wick. Like I thought
Yeah.
we know what that movie is. The story is the writing is not the most important part. We just know we're gonna see like insane amounts of gunfight, insane amount of like fighting in general. Like it's like we know what we're in for there. Like, and if
Right.
there's a little bit of a storyline that we can follow, then it makes us happy.
Right.
Like,
And we are surprised into joy when it's actually well written. When the
yeah,
narrative hangs together, like part of the narrative hanging together has to be that in the third act, things that are proposed in the first act are resolved. That's a basic of like
yeah,
story
right,
structure. This is a
right,
basic idea of story structure. Like in the first third of your book, you're going to introduce an idea. In the second third of your book, you're going to have conflict. And then the third third of your book, you're going to resolve everything. This is basic story structure. This is the what's called Freytag's triangle, basically,
yeah,
is what that is, right? And I'm seeing all over the map Freytag's triangle being violated left and right. Now, I'll forgive that if I like the director and if the director's strong enough to wrangle the material. So, for instance, the Dark Knight trilogy, right? Got to be honest. Christopher Nolan had no idea what to do in the third Dark Knight movie because Heath Ledger kicked it.
yeah,
He had no idea what to do. Now, his entire plan was to bring back the Joker and do something else and close that loop. And
right.
then and Heath Ledger died. Okay. So how do you write yourself out of that situation? That's a massive problem. And he solved it the best way he knew how. But he was only able to propose that solution because he'd been writing with his brother Jonathan, writing really challenging stuff from Memento all the way through Inception, all of which are movies, even The Prestige and that one that he did with what's his name in Alaska. I can't remember the name of that movie. But he did solid writing all the way through, and thus earned the stripe of being able to sort of write his way out of the back end of a terrible situation where the main actor that you wanted to use was irreplaceable. That's writing, and that's the director writing, with his brother who's the writer, and so the vision there is clear. But for a lot of these movies, man, we know the writing's not hanging together. We know you're trying to wow us with special effects. And this is my problem with Avatar. I mean, it just is. Like, at a certain point, and this is my problem with the first Avatar, really. Like, I know I know why it touches you. It works for you. But I'll be honest, like, I got 2/3 through that movie and I got a headache. I was like, okay, like, the story's not enough. Like, and the visuals are killing me here. Like, I got to get out of here. It was too much. And by the way, I've never felt compelled to go back and revisit it, which is a sign of, for me, a sign of, is the writing there or is it not?
Yeah.
So.
Right. Again, I was picking on the second one as well. The first one I liked. The second one, it just wasn't as strong. Like, it just didn't. It didn't hit the same way. It didn't hit the same nerve. It didn't hit, like, to your point. It kind of lost a little bit of his lackluster, right? Like, even for me, like, somebody who really liked the first one. Well, but I think that happens. I think that happens a lot in these movies that they're trying to, continue on. Now, I do think it gets interesting when you think of, we talked a little bit about the Aliens universe and the Alien and Predator universe. I do think it gets interesting when you have a series of 15, 10, 12, 15 movies that are all interconnected some way, somehow, and that some of them are good and some of them are not. And some of them, like, some of them you can watch multiple times and others you just ignore. I mean, like, I just think, I think it goes like, there's a hump there, right? Like, you get to a point where you're like, F it. I'm just going to make so many movies that people just can't ignore me anymore. Like, that's just essentially what they did. And that's what they're doing with John Wick too. Like, they're like, we're just going to make enough movies that nobody's going to be able to ignore us. We're just going to keep giving Keanu Reeves money.
Well, and John Wick,
I like Keanu Reeves, so it's not like I have a problem with him. I'm just saying.
Well, John Wick will ultimately hang on sort of how much more punishment can Keanu Reeves take.
Exactly.
And he's in what, his early 50s now? Something like that?
Like, I think he might be like 54, 55. I think he's getting up there a little bit.
Getting a little long in the tooth there, Keanu.
Especially to be doing your own stunts there, kid.
And we can call you kid. We're contemporaries. We can call you kid.
Oh my God, no, wait, he's 60. He just turned 60 in this month, September.
What?
I'm looking at it right now.
No, okay, you're not a contemporary. Sorry. No. 15 years? No, that's too big a hump. No, dude, you gotta stop.
Exactly. What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Well, I mean, there's no different. Someone just came out with another action movie recently. Liam Neeson just came out with another action movie recently, and I'm going, same thing. I'm going, what are we doing here, people? Like,
well, Liam.
Although he did one a couple of years ago where he was some sort of assassin that had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Like, that had a little bit of an interesting twist to it. I was like, oh, this one, I actually watched it and I was like, okay, that wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen. But I'm just thinking now he's coming into another one. I'm going, what are we doing? Why?
Well, why? Liam Neeson can get away with it. Number one, he's not high kicking, high flipping. He's not doing jiu-jitsu. He's not trying to choke anybody out. Although, interesting enough, have you seen, switch to TV for just a second, have you seen the show on FX? Which I don't have anymore because I canceled Hulu. But have you seen the show on FX, Old Man, with Jeff Bridges?
Jeff Bridges and Jonathan Lithgow.
Yeah. Now, I do like that, particularly the first couple of episodes of that, because he did jiu-jitsu in that. And I got to bring up jiu-jitsu at least once on this podcast, every episode. It's fine. But I like it because he's like choking out this young guy, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it would go. That's precisely it. That he's not kicking anybody. He's not picking he's like, no, please. I'm going to shoot you. And if I can't shoot you, I'm going to choke you.
Yeah. So I actually do watch that show, and I thought the first season was excellent. The second season started just recently. I'm about 3 episodes into the second season, and the second season is falling off a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah. Okay. I think it's hard for these older. I think it's hard for
Oh,
older
by the way, Jeff
people.
Bridges, the main character in it, 75, 76.
76.
75 or 76, I don't remember, but he's either 75 or 76. And Jonathan Lithgow is 79.
Lord.
Yeah.
It's like my parents' age. Lord. All right. Well, I mean, I guess, here's what I do
I mean,
ultimately.
not everybody
Tom.
could be Tony Jaa, right? Like that's the
We all have something. I'll have to have something to aspire to. No, I take heart in that if you find what you love to do, yeah, you never work a day in your life. Okay. No, if you find what you love to do, you can work until you're dead. That's the end of that statement. That's
That's a way better way of saying it because it's true.
And so I'm glad these guys have found work that they love. I'm glad that they found work that they're good at. And I hope that they work until they decide that they want to stop. All right. I think that's it. I think we've wrapped up our top 5 sci-fi films. I don't know that we got any leadership lessons out of that, but it was an engaging and invigorating conversation, as always, with Tom Libby. My name is Hasan Sorrells, and you've been listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. And with that, well, we're out. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard.